Well, welcome to Mindset Monday. I am here with Scott Garber. I am so excited to have him here. We're going to have him tell a little bit about himself, but I just want to give you a little bit of information about who I am and what I'm doing here with all of you today. My name's Denise Zack. I'm a life coach. I have been in the field of helping people for the last 20 years. And one of the things that's been so important to me as I've worked through my career is to help people understand what motivates them, what holds them back, and the things that can get in their way from being successful. So this podcast is all about that. It's finding people who are killing it, crushing it, doing amazing things, but then really kind of trying to pick their brain a little bit. So Scott, I'm going to be picking your brain a little bit today about how you get up in the morning, how you show up to the day, and what makes you feel successful and be successful. And we all stumble, but what we need to do is just get back up one more time than we've fallen down. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So with me, I have Scott Garber. And so I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about you, Scott, who you are, how you got into the field you're into, what you do, and, how you've grown over the years.
Awesome. Well, first off, Denise, thanks for having me on your show. Love to be one of the early guests as you spawn up something great here. So, again, really excited. And yeah, it's very fun to get on these podcasts and have the opportunity to talk about mindset, because what happens between the 6 inches between your ears is where all of the magic, the turmoil, it's where it all happens. And so really excited to take you guys on my journey, from my early days growing up to collegiate sports, into my business ventures now. They all go together, right? And we're compounding and building either really good habits or really bad habits. And we're going to talk and cover both of those today. So again, thanks for having me. And let's take a dive headfirst into who I am and how we ended up here. So again, my name's Scott Garber. I'm from South Florida originally. And I think the first thing that everybody should know about me is I have been an athlete since the time that I could crawl. I had some kind of stick, ball, glove on my hand, and was always just finding a way to, be athletic. Little did I know that I would learn so many intangible things about life through these games of, hockey, soccer, football, etc. So fast forward a little bit, I was a highly decorated athlete coming out of high school, was heavily recruited, and had a really fun recruiting story. I was committed to the University of Tennessee, and a few weeks before signing day, just had some coaching changes and actually figured out that, hey, they're going to go a different direction. And that was my first real life lesson of don't count money until it's in your bank account. Mm-hmm. So had a really fun, not fun at the time, but reflecting back on it, pretty crazy journey, but landed at the University of South Alabama. And, through that whole process, we'll touch on this later, but it really taught me how to fail forward, because, I had my dad with me there along the ride. And at the time I felt just devastated, but there were opportunities on the horizon. And put my head down, figured out, I had to go play ball somewhere. South Alabama was an opportunity, and they were actually a startup program. So when I got the call, they were, mounds of dirt with an idea of starting a Division I football team, and they actually played Tennessee in 5 years. So, got an opportunity to go lay the foundation, build legacy instead of inherit it. And that really laid a solid foundation and solidified the fact that I wanted to go and build and be a creator in this world. Didn't really know how I was going to get there. Didn't know that football was going to be a vehicle to get me to that mindset. But it did. And so fast forward a little bit, finished up playing 5 years of college football, got to go back to Tennessee and almost beat those guys. And the one thing they don't tell you when you're finishing up football is that no one's going to plan the rest of your life for you. You have such a structured and regimented routine. And so I got chewed up and spit out of college football and needed to sort of figure out where to land as an adult. And so, did what a lot of college athletes do. I went to Enterprise and did the management training program, started to take all of these life lessons that I had learned and actually mold them into productivity. And so, I think a theme that you'll hear throughout is coaching. And, I've had great coaching when I was in college, I had great coaching coming out into the professional world. And so cut my teeth in the selling world there, got an opportunity that brought me out to Colorado. And that's where, I needed to sort of settle down and figure out what's a career look like. And so I knew I wanted to marry professional and sports and find a startup in between, right? So I found a happy home at Captain U, which was an early stage startup. Went through an amazing ride with those guys. We ended up getting acquired, and I've been in the sports technology space now for about 6 years. To bring you up to current speed, because we could talk about that for days.
Yeah.
Last June, I was dating my now wife, and we looked at each other, Denise, and on paper we had it made in the shade. We were living downtown. We had making good money. We were having, good times with our friends, but there was just something missing. And this is the part that they don't teach you in school. This is what it's very hard to take a leap of faith, but we looked at each other and we're like, we need something different. And so within 3 weeks, we sold all of our belongings. We got out of our lease. We bought a 1977 11-foot travel trailer, and we set out on an adventure that just totally changed our lives. And I'm excited to go ahead and unpack that with you because, as an adult, that was the eye-opening moment of mindset of, finally being where my feet are, being present, and defining success for what it looks like for me and not what someone is projecting success should look like. So it's been a wild journey over the last 18 months of trying to execute on this new idea of success. But I'm currently scaling and building a fintech company called Check, which is an alternative cash management solution, still helping athletes, but also serving a civic mission of helping the underbanked and underfunded folks here in this country. And so as we go through this pandemic, really working on, carrying out that mission, continuing to evolve the mindset and meet great folks along the way, and build those relationships, which is how we found ourselves on this call. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded, but
no,
tried to set the stage for who I was.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's an amazing story. I'm curious, when you got in the car that first day, right? Or the vehicle you were in, what was the feeling and what were the thoughts going through your head? Was it like, holy crap, what have we done? Or was it, we're just going to do this, throw caution to the wind?
Yeah, it was more liberating because, we both knew that the traditional ideas of success, we could accomplish those. And so once we hit a certain benchmark or threshold, we were like, let's go take a risk. And so, I think you're only human if you feel those butterflies and the, oh shit moment, like what did we just do?
Yeah.
But that quickly faded away when, you realize that you have a good support system. And, to quote the late Kobe Bryant, he said, when you start embracing when you realize that the destination is the journey, then you can start living. And that was, it was poetic, and that's sort of how we felt. We had no agenda. We completely turned off our phones and we felt like we were living for the first time, even though we had both done amazing things in our life. So scared, but really excited.
Yeah. And, I think it's so important that you were able to get to that place because society puts such strict rules and puts people in boxes and situations and in order and in line. And, when you meet someone, you're supposed to date, and then you're supposed to get engaged, and then you're supposed to get married, and then you're supposed to have kids. And, all of these things. Or when you're an athlete, you're supposed to, graduate and go to college and play sports. And there's all of these really prescripted things that we're supposed to do in our society. And when people don't follow that path, I think it can be judgmental, not just, we have our own internal judgments, but we also have the judgments of people around us that are telling us, oh, what are you doing? You have a career, you have your life set. Why on earth would you do something like this? Did you get any of those comments and how did you manage that?
For sure. And I mean, just one thing worth noting, is my grandparents, were successful, and they, in the time that they were raised, it was, put your head down, go start a family, build your career. And when you retire, then you have all these, joyous amenities from when you're 70 until you pass away. And so my grandparents had an RV. They went out on the road and did this. I was fortunate one summer to go ahead and meet them. And it always was just sort of a conundrum for me, because I'm in high school and I'm wanting to go hike all these mountains and do all these, crazy adventures. And my grandma's like, let's go walk on this trail. And so, as I was going through it, I was like, I understand this is the norm, but as a human, as my own being, it was like, why do I have to succumb to what the norm is if I feel like I can carve it out in a more effective, efficient, evolved way? And so, I mean, this is going to be a funny quote, but, Cat Williams, I grew up with him as a comedian, and he had this little sketch about haters, right? And he said, if you don't have more haters today than you did yesterday, then you're doing something wrong. And so, so there were for sure naysayers along the road, but I think, as younger generations are coming up, we're realizing that the American dream needed to be evolved. And so we found more people with the sentiment of, you guys are living our dream versus like, hey, what are you doing off the beaten path? And so, I think we got more encouragement along the road, and it really solidified that what we were doing, when you go against the grain a little bit, you might have some bumps and bruises, but you can really carve out something special instead of just swimming with, the whole school of fish, for an analogy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I just love the whole idea of it. It's kind of taking ownership of your own life and your own world, and not putting yourself in a box and thinking, well, wait a minute, being courageous enough to think, well, wait a minute, just because that's been happening for the last 50 years, 100 years, or 500 years, why does it mean that I have to follow that same path? And so that's risk inherent. There is definite risk there. And so I'm just curious, throughout the process, or at any point in your life, did the risk feel too much? Did it ever feel like, gosh, we kind of were in over our heads, or, maybe we dove in a little too deep, or, anything along those lines where you kind of questioned what you were doing? And then how did you manage that?
Yeah. So quick caveat, if you're ever going to get married or you're ever going to pursue a relationship, I highly recommend putting yourself in situations that out of your comfort zone that test all of these boundaries before you go and take a leap into something. And just for all our viewers, I just got married. So my wife, thank you. My wife, Allison, passed all the tests, and more importantly, she put up with me.
You both passed the test, right?
Right. And so, I mean, we definitely ran into situations that were high stress. We broke down. We found ourselves stuck on the side of a mountain with no cell service. And, you learn to overcome. And so I think, one of the eye-opening moments is when you remove yourself from the social sphere, not even the bubble as a whole, just the social sphere, and you're just present with either yourself or your significant other. You can't blame anybody else. There's no other, scapegoats. And so you really have to take that look in the mirror and say, like, either we're going to get over this and figure out ways to move forward, or we're just stalled and we can't go anywhere. And so, we came across just a ton of different things that we could have never anticipated, but ultimately reflecting back on it has just made us better humans, more open-minded. And I think it taught me to take people for who they are and not what you want them to be. And so I think these were all lessons that were almost apropos for what coronavirus gave us, right? It was, no one could have ever anticipated something at this scale so quickly. Mm-hmm. And we like to say that we organically built that tool set, or started building that tool set. So, this isn't so foreign to us, with shakeups and unexpected times, and, being forced to live outside of the norm and in a routine. So, yeah, you learn so much, and it felt like I was living, Denise, for the first time. We were so free, and one thing that when we were out on the road that I think I fell victim to, and a lot of people that I talk to, old and young, athletes and non-athletes, is very few people take time to reflect back on their successes and failures. And that stepping out just for a couple months gave us the space, gave us the mindset to really start to define what success looked like for us. And it wasn't driven by some artificial inflation. It wasn't driven by emotion. It was just being present and saying, if this is what we want from our life, now we can go ahead and start to set out a path to get there, instead of being reactive to say, hey, this is what life gave me. Now I have to figure out how to get there. So piece of advice to everybody: find a way to step out of it for a little bit and define success for yourself. And it just opens up a Pandora's box of a good time.
Yeah, I love it. And what I love even more is that really what you're talking about in terms of success has nothing to do with money. You're defining success in just the breadth of life, right? And just being connected, being grounded, being centered, being reflective, and developing a healthy mindset, being able to manage stress. And, we had a little mini conversation before we started today. And that was one of the things that I was talking to you about. And the reason why I went into the field that I did in terms of helping people in life coaching is that we're not given those skills when we're in school. We're taught how to do specific, things like how to do accounting or how to become a teacher, or, how to even, how to exercise. We're taught those kinds of things, but we are not given any mental training at all in terms of how to manage stress. What does it feel like when disappointment comes, and how do you manage it? How do you take a step back? How do you learn to be where your feet are? And all of those lessons that you learned on that 6-month journey are just, it's just amazing to me. And what I love too is that, you were able to, when you said it, you said, I was able to take a step out of kind of, you're off the hamster wheel at that point, right? Mm-hmm. And our society has become so much of just a huge hamster wheel that never turns off, never shuts down, never gives us a break. It's 24/7 dings, notifications, information coming at us, demands happening. And so we're not in this space where we can, say, let me take a step back and see how I'm feeling in this moment right now, or how this person's impacting me, or how am I impacting the group I'm with right now. If we all learned how to do that, this world would be a much better place. So I think you probably learned some of the most valuable lessons that I could ever wish that someone would develop. And I think we need to learn them in kindergarten, though.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting? I mean, there's two sides to every coin, right? Because when you do start to enter back into what society looks like, I have found, and we have found, that when you have a path, or when you have a North Star, it makes those decisions easier, right? It makes the process easier. And so, one thing that's been a constant through my life has been coaching, right? And so, and it's taken on different shapes, it's taken on different forms. But, when we've come back off the road, and now, I know what success looks like for me, and my family and my business. Now I can go and absorb coaching and actually put it back into motion, right? So it's really trying to find the balance between the process of getting things done successfully and still being able to live. And I think that, a lot of people look for balance in all aspects of life, but this has been one pillar where we're finding if we're able to be within, 40 and 60, right, and try and find some balance there between those two pillars of process and success. And now we're starting to, pull the wool over the, or I don't know the analogy I'm looking for, but we're really starting to sort of stumble on happiness. And it's just been the coolest thing, because if you just live a lifestyle out on the road, some people are cut out for it. But I have aspirations to grow a business. I have aspirations to make impact beyond just my bubble. And so, success for us is all wrapped up in the word of balance. And
Yeah.
Once that goes off kilter, you need a plan to be able to reset, fail forward a little bit, and build. And so that's what we've been actively working on. And it's hard, right? Like, I mean, if I'm just going to give the audience and the listener something, like, it's fun to talk about all the good things that have happened and the smiles and the growth, but you got to know that there were years of hardships and failure and disappointment and adversity, which led me to cultivating this mindset. It didn't just wake up one day and I want to go do this.
Yeah, no, you talk about so many important things, that the ability to reflect. And I wanted, the last sentence that you stated, I want to kind of dive into that a little bit, but you talk about having a goal, and that maybe being on the road for you wasn't a life choice for your entire life. For some people that may be it, right? Mm-hmm. But even in that process, right, you had some overarching goal, which was to find yourself and to let go and to just be together. And that in and of itself is a goal. And that kind of helped you on your journey. You knew that it wasn't forever. And you knew that you wanted to explore, and you knew you wanted to feel free and let go and just kind of reconnect with yourself. And you gave it 150%, and you did it, which is awesome, right? And yeah. People don't give themselves those opportunities. Like I said, we kind of get stuck in the motion of what's happening in society. But I also think, like you said, as you come back, it is important to be mindful, right? To be reflective, to think about what's happening, what's going on, but also have some goals in mind. People who have goals, people who, specifically, if you're writing the goal down, people who have them are much more focused. They're much more likely to succeed. They're usually happier people, more content, and they're less distracted because they have something that they're looking for. And it's not this, that they're just kind of, a pinball, getting knocked all over the place. Yep. And so, finding that balance, I think, is super important in today's society. But you talked about some stumbling blocks. You talked about being able to fail forward. And so, and developing the mindset, right? You have the mindset now, and you had it probably before you went on the journey, but you learned a lot more. But how did you develop the mindset? When you were in elementary school, did you have the mindset? When you were in junior high school, did you have the mindset? Was it a progression over years of coaching and being an athlete? What helped you, or was there a particular challenge that you went through that kind of was like a real turning point for you, or a learning situation?
Yeah. So not to go too much in the weeds, but, my family, for good and for bad, have really helped shape Scott for who I was. And so, I was very close with my father. He played a very instrumental role in laying the foundation. He was alongside the journey with collegiate sports. And then, as I grew up and became a young man, post school, I went out and did some things on my own. And so, that was, those were really hard growing pains for us as a unit, as a family. And then, me and my father, just as our relationship, because when you have that slotted out for years and years and years, if you don't break that cycle, then it just continues to manifest itself. And so that was really the first time where I had to make a decision to say hey, I have to go and figure this world out for myself. And that meant, leaving behind my best friend, my dad, my coach, and just taking a leap of faith and saying, when I moved out to Colorado, I had $200. I had an opportunity and a good buddy that I played rugby with. And so, I think that was that, as I reflect back on it, one of the more defining moments. And since then, me and my father have reconnected, and we have a relationship that has flourished, and that, being able to go something full circle and complete the cycle, really showed me a lot, and it took an open mind, and it took this kind of, all the inherent things that he taught me in order to go ahead and reestablish a relationship with him. And so, yes, there's so many moments that I reflect back on of coaching and being able to fail forward, but that one sort of just highlighted them all. And to, getting married 2 weeks ago and having my dad at the wedding just sort of was bigger than any deal that I've closed, any business that I've been a part of. And so, I think once I personalized everything and said, man, if I can accomplish this with my own nuclear unit, it makes the rest of these things look very, tangible. And so, but that mindset, that those being able to, when he doesn't answer the phone, or when somebody, tells you no, that you just don't wake up and, take that on the chin like a champ. You have to, repeatedly go through it. And just for a football example, I was a punter. And so everything about being a punter was 80% mental, 20% physical, right? You do the same thing over and over, but if you can shut your eyes and visualize and almost meditate and see what that's going to look like, you can see the outcome, then you're able to go ahead and start to go through that progression over and over and over. And so, I was able to take, what I did in the football game in the field, where it was like, hey, you shanked the first punt. You can't just go and be out there aloof. You blow your first sales call of the day or your first podcast. Hey, you got to be able to get back on the horse and go. And so, just being able to pull all of those and now start to apply them to real things that matter, not a football game, but relationships, business, family, marriage. That's the part that was just sort of like mind blowing. I think one thing that I would say that really helped me, and, shout out to coaches along the way, but Mark Noodleberg, who, is part of Steve Noodleberg cohort of On the Ball, is this idea of compounding, right? And so I work in the financial space now, and say there's compounding interest. It can either work really for you or really against you. And we talk about stacking good ideas and stacking successes. And so, if you're able to go ahead and get wins in your life and manufacture those wins, then you can start to compound those successes. And it's amazing, Denise, like when you change and flip the switch in your mind and the script, holy smokes, good things start to just pop up around you. And so, it's just taking a combination of all of those innate things that I was taught, and now being able to put them into motion. Really long-winded answer. Didn't know I was going down there.
No, that's okay. It's great. No, I mean, really, you're talking about kind of pushing against some things growing up where you kind of felt like you had to do certain things, or you were expected to do certain things, but you kind of went out on your own and learned a lot about yourself, and had some challenges within those decisions, right?
Yep.
Which I think is amazing. But if you continue to do what you've always done, you will continue to get what you've always gotten. And that you decided, at that point in your life, you realized that there was a pattern and you wanted to change it. And you stepped outside of your comfort zone, which I think is something that people many times are really afraid to do.
Yep.
Because of the repercussions, or because they're afraid of the unknown, and more because people are just afraid of the unknown and they're afraid to be uncomfortable. And I think that, we as a society, just, in general, as people, we want to feel safe. It's one of our, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's like one of your basic tenets of life. But when you want to kind of stretch yourself and grow and learn, you learn much more from something that you've made a mistake with than from any positive thing happening, or from staying in a cocoon. So, if you started to, going back, if you were a child learning how to walk and you fell down the first time and you didn't get back up, or your parents said, hey, you're really bad at walking, I wouldn't try that anymore. We might have a lot of people that, are not walking, right? But the reality is at that age, when you think about it, we don't give up. We just keep going. We fall down and we get back up one more time. We get back up one more time. We get back up one more time, right? And so we lose that mentality along the way sometimes because we're afraid, or we're just not sure. And so I think that what you're talking about is not being afraid to fail, and not taking it as an ego rejection, right? That it's not like you're a bad person or you're a failure, or or, you're just not good at that, you learn from the mistakes. I know, and that comes, I think, a lot from coaching too, because when you're with a coach, they don't say, oh, you're horrible at that, don't try it again. They say, hey, turn your foot a little bit more the next time you try to kick it. I think if you just pivot a little bit, it'll make a difference. And, 1 degree of difference can create a mountain of change. So over time, right? We know that. So I love all the lessons and all
And
the things
to
you're talking about.
piggyback and sort of bring this into the real world context here, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's a couple foundation things that I have found to be true that led up to this pandemic, where it's like this is the culmination point of all of it. And a couple of them being, you're as good as the people you surround yourself with. And so coaches have to be in there, right? There has to be somebody in your world beyond yourself to go ahead and make you better, right? Like, because complacency, as we're seeing as a country right now, can get you in a lot of trouble, right? It's comfortable, we know it, but when we're comfortable, we don't keep growing, we don't keep evolving, and ultimately you sort of get caught behind. And so, I have been so fortunate enough to find Allison, my wife, who was a former athlete, has a different personality than me, but really has unique ways to challenge me as a human to bring the best out of me and to not be complacent with what it is, but to go ahead and continue to evolve and change. So that's the first one. And then the second one is like I was saying, like coronavirus couldn't be a more primed example of we stopped evolving here as a society. We became very complacent. And so now we're seeing innovation come at scale. But just imagine, just take a step back and imagine if schools would have been progressive, if schools would have been a little more forward thinking and adopting technology, right? Yeah. Not going with the norm, not cutting budgets the way we traditionally do. I'm not saying the pandemic wouldn't come and still wreak havoc and there still wouldn't be challenges. But maybe, just maybe, we would be in a better situation to go ahead and continue on the foundation of what's so important, which is educating our children. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the most real world example to say you cannot rest on your laurels because you don't know what's coming. You don't know where it's coming from next. But if you're in the right mindset and you're in the right headspace, you can overcome and achieve these things, and they're not mountains, they're molehills at that point. Yeah. So it's just so apropos the conversation with what we're experiencing, in 2020 in this hell in a handbasket.
Yeah. A lot. And I think a lot of people have struggled in this because they didn't have the mindset, they didn't have the confidence in themselves to be able to kind of pivot. And so things just felt like they were crumbling down around them. And you found people kind of feeling desperate and kind of like they're spinning out of control. And what am I going to do? And what's it going to look like? Again, that fear of the unknown and not knowing that if you just kind of take a deep breath, I mean, you can't control what you can't control. So you can go kicking and screaming, or you can take a deep breath and take a step forward and figure it out.
Yep.
And you also touched on something that I like to chat about with people too, is those growth people. You had a lot of growth people in your life, your coaches, your dad, I'm sure some other people, but growth people are those people that kind of push you to the edge a little bit, right out of your comfort zone, because they want the best for you, not because they're trying to sabotage you, but because they know that you can do more. They know that there's more in you, and we can do that for ourselves. But I also think it's important to have those growth people in our life as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where what the piece of advice that I would leave everybody with is, if you would have, or me reflecting back on myself, we'll just go back 3 years, which is a short blip of time. I don't look, sound, think like that person. The foundation's the same, but it's incredible when I go back and listen to videos of myself and sales calls and things I was doing, and I'm like, what? So I say all of that to say, guys, it's never too late. If you're still breathing and you're still kicking, you have control of what's between these 2 ears, and what you talk about, what you ingest, is ultimately what's going to come back out. And so if you want to be more positive, if you want to anything, whatever that looks like, my advice would be just do it. Start living make momentum towards what you want, and inertia will follow. And I can almost guarantee that it'll be better than the place that you're currently in right now, just off my own experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the habits of the mind can be very constricting and hold us back a lot. So diving in and just trying, just that one time, right, gives us that little peek to a door that we've never opened before. And that's all you're kind of looking to do, really, is just see what's beyond the door. And we think usually, a lot of times people think, oh, it's something scary, but the reality is it's usually something beautiful, or something that we needed to learn, or something that helps us grow. Um, and so I want to ask you one last question.
Yep.
If you look back, when you're 65, how do you want to be remembered? What would it look like if you lived your best life, and people can look to you and say, he did it. Scott had it going on. What is that legacy you think you'd like to leave?
So I would love to be known as a creative disruptor. And I think that I like to push the needle, but in a calculated way, and push the needle forward. Without just being a bull in a china shop and wreaking havoc without a solution. And so I'm not sure what that looks like. And I think that's part of my journey. Is I always wanted to say, I want to go solve the financial crisis, or I want to go solve world hunger, or whatever that vast may. I don't know. I don't know where it will be, but I want to be in the position to tell my story, to make impact into people's lives, and to leave this world a little bit better than I found it, because the journey we have here is just so finite. So I think that would be my answer, is just to be a good human, be a good husband, be a good father, and make a small impact and see where it can go.
Awesome. Great plan.
Now we have to execute.
Right. Well, you already are. You're on it. You're there. You're on the path. So, Scott Garber, Vice President at Check, I want to thank you so much again for your amazing story, your insight, your passion, and your motivation to create change and just be a really formidable wellness kind of guru, right? Like mindset guru. I really appreciate your time and your energy. I want to thank everyone who's tuning in and watching. If you want to get in touch with me, you can check out my website at denisezacklifecoach.com. I'll be doing lots more of these, and hopefully we'll have Scott back at another time and connect again. But I just want to wish everybody a happy Monday, and we'll see you on the other side. Take care. See you next time.
Thanks, Denise.
Thanks, Scott.